Before we get into the episode, please could you do me a favour and hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast. You'll be actively helping our community to grow and for us to reach more people, and it allows us to get great new guests on for future episodes.
Art versus the algorithm with Will Preisner.
Hey, welcome to episode 3 of Art versus the Algorithm, or AVA for short. I'm Will Preisner, your host, and I'm an art, nude and portrait photographer, and I'm also a commercial cinematographer. In this episode, I'm talking to Rachel Evans, a life model based in Manchester, who I met during a clay life session that was run by our guest on episode 2, Nina van Hakeren. We recorded this episode in a studio in Manchester and had a few interruptions, so we had to move around a little bit. But thankfully, it's pretty seamless thanks to the great job our editor Robbie has done on ironing any of the problems out. Rachel's enthusiasm is infectious. It's a very open conversation as she shares in a straightforward way what impact being a life model has had on her life and the way she views her body image and overall confidence. I took a lot away from this conversation. Notably, it reminded me to be positive about myself and to embrace who I am, and I hope that it has the same effect on you. So, without further ado, let's get on to episode 3 with Rachel Evans. Can you take me back to what got you first started as a life model? Like, what was the first spark for you to follow this path?
I think what it was, so I moved to Manchester in the middle of COVID, and I was working a very soul-destroying office job on like 12-hour shifts, 7 on, 7 off. Obviously stopped dancing regularly at this point, and I'd been telling all my creative pals for years to move to Manchester. Most of them had. A friend of mine who actually we started training for this soul-destroying office job together, I was being like, what are you doing in Stoke? You need to move to Manchester. Like, he's a music producer. And off he went, and he moved up here. And like 6 months later, he was like, what are you still doing there? Take your own advice. So this is a very typical Rach move, which is to quit my job and hand the notice in on my flat in the middle of COVID with nowhere to live in Manchester at the same time, to be a full-time self-employed creative in the cost of living crisis and lockdown. But I was like, no, like I'm not turning 30 still doing this job. Like there's just no way. So the moving up here was very chaotic. It nearly didn't happen, but it was all okay in the end. And I think it was just a moment of being like, okay, we're going to be not like, this sounds really cringe to be like, you know, like a reinvention of yourself. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of like, here's a massive opportunity for me to just do loads of stuff that I've always wanted to do. And I'd never been to a life drawing class. It didn't happen at school. I didn't do art at university, but I've always done art, and most of my family are artists. And I think I was just having a conversation with an artist friend of my mum's who used to be a life model. And she was like, oh, I'll see if I can get you a gig at Southport College, which is where she used to do it. And she did. And that's how I ended up life modeling. And it was kind of an extension of the dancing thing. I kind of missed using my body as some sort of like expressive tool. And it was a way of combining that with the art side of the business. So yeah, my first gig was Southport College every week for 9 months.
Wow. Okay. So it's pretty intensive.
Very intense. And it was a taught session. So it was great for me because I got like a free art education, and it was 3 hours, and it was a really small group. So it was probably the most wonderful introduction to becoming a life model that you could have asked for, other than travel and the really bad wages. Sorry, Southport College. It was not cool.
I suppose it was good to get paid to do the training, like you say.
Yeah, I mean, by the time I factored in my train tickets, I was maybe making £9 for that 3 hour session. And I was out of the house for 6 hours just to get there and back on the trains. So
right.
They asked me to go back the following year, and I said, no, thank you.
Right. Well, I suppose you'd done your learning by then.
I'd done my learning, and it gave me, I started my Instagram. I started taking reference photos and selling reference packs, and it gave me the confidence to approach the Manchester scene without being like a complete newbie, because Manchester's, as you probably know, you're spoiled for choice for life drawing classes in Manchester. Even in the 3 years that I've been here, just loads popping up. So it felt like quite a scary thing to be kind of like, I'm new, please let me model. But because I was kind of like, I had a little bit of an online presence and a little bit of confidence, people were like, oh yeah, okay, like come and have a go kind of thing. So
Amazing.
yeah, it was very, very lovely.
How was that
gig.
transition? Was it comfortable?
To be fair, like I'm very, very lucky. Have never really had like a bad experience. I think the life modeling community as well is so incredibly supportive of each other. If you're an artist, but if you're a model, and so much of it is like word of mouth and recommendations, and there's no agency for life models. We've got a Facebook group where we all kind of help each other out, and everyone's agreed that this is the minimum amount that we ask to be paid.
Like a union.
Like a union, essentially, but like an informal one. And what's fascinating about it is that you very rarely meet each other in person. So a lot of it is online through Instagram. So yeah, when you actually meet each other, it's a really like lovely thing. You kind of like, I know what your butt looks like, but I've never met you ever. Like, and here we are like in the pub having a pint, and it's lovely. So yeah, Lisa, who runs live drawing with Hop, she actually organised a Life Models Christmas do last Christmas, where we all went to the pub and had like an evening in the pub together. And it was really nice to actually meet each other in person.
With the clothes on as well.
Cute. It was like, don't recognise you with your clothes on. That old chestnut. If I had £1 for every time I'd heard that.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Funnily enough, I've not thought of that one. Which, yeah, maybe you have a bit more respect for me having.
That's good.
It's the sort of thing I might say. So yeah. I'm pleased that I've not like ruined that for you. But I met you when you were doing some life modelling for Clay Life with Nina, who I've also spoken to on AVA, or Ava, which I'm also calling Art versus the Algorithm. So what is the range of modelling that you do, like in what settings? Because that was it for clay.
That was
clay sculpture class.
That was so lovely. I'd been really wanting to model for Nina for ages because she's unique in what she's doing. So that was a really lovely experience. I guess a lot of them are kind of like your groups of between kind of 15, 20. Last night I life modelled. I did a duet with an amazing life model called Adam. We did a duet at a class that happens in Studio B.
What's a duet, sorry?
We modelled together, 2 models. Okay. So there was maybe like 50 people there. Sometimes when it's really busy, you get like 70 people sometimes at certain spaces. So most of them are kind of like those types of groups, but I also model for small groups. I go to people's individual homes if it's all good and it seems safe and I've met the person and things like that. I'll do like individual portrait sessions. And I've done 1 online life modelling session. I'd like to do some more, but I don't think, because I have to have my glasses off, I can't really see anything. So I think the setting up and the moving the camera around would be a little bit clunky. But there's a huge scope of opportunities for life modelling, but it would be nice to have something here because it's my space.
Yeah, that's what you're working towards, doing more of.
Yeah, I'd like to do more online. I'd also like to get a camera, a proper one, so I can take my own reference pictures of a higher quality, because at the moment they're just off my phone. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just elevate things a little bit. Yeah, that's
exciting.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed when I was at Clay Life with you, you seemed really relaxed, like when I first met you, and you were nude. And I think we even just chatted while you were nude. In contrast to that very relaxed version of you, I mean, I'm saying in contrast, but it may not be the case. How did you feel the first time you ever did it? Like, what was it like to like remove your clothes in front of a group of people for like the first time? Like, what emotions and feelings were you going through in that first experience?
I was so chilled all day. On the train on the way to Southport, like, great, I'm really looking forward to it. Got there, really relaxed, like met the woman, and then she like took me to my little like broom cupboard in the corner to get changed and was like, you just like get ready in here and like I'll come and get you and I'll introduce you to everybody. And then she said, don't tell anyone that you've never done this before. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Kind of get that. Some people can be a little bit, if you say, I've never done this before, they're immediately going to think that you're not very good and kind of go into that with this preconception. So I was like, okay, understood. And then she came to get me. She stood me in the middle of the room with all the easels and everybody there. She introduced me. And then she was like, and begin. And it was kind of like, oh, drop the robe. Usually you start off with some short poses, like 5 1-minutes. So in that moment, my adrenaline went through the roof and I was like, oh my God, what are you doing?
But once you drop the robe?
Once I dropped the robe, I was fine up until the moment I dropped the robe and struck a pose. But very quickly, I was like, oh God, I've only got 60 seconds and I've got to think about the next pose. So I would say by the third minute, I'd calmed down and was just very much in that place of like, right, I'm here. I want to do a really good job. I want to use all my dancing experience to be as interesting looking as possible and be ready and on time for the next pose. So I think I surprised myself at how like scary it was in that first 3 minutes, considering I'd felt really cool about it all day.
It sounds pretty impressive. It was only 3 minutes.
Well, it was kind of like a minute can feel very, very slow or very, very quick, depending on the situation. They felt like it was 5 seconds. So I kind of very quickly had to stop thinking about the fact of what you're doing and be like, you need to have something ready to move into. And that was really useful in kind of bringing me out of like panic mode.
Why do you think they thought, what are you doing, crossed your mind?
I really don't know. I think I was so blasé about it because from so many years of dancing, from a very young age as well, you kind of get used to getting changed in front of loads of people, having like quick costume changes at the side of the stage, for example. And there was one particular event where I was in 2 dances that happened straight after you. I had maybe not even 2 minutes, maybe like 90 seconds to get into a different costume with different makeup and a different hairstyle. So that meant I just had to come off stage, stand in the wings and just do this. And people were undressing me, redressing me, doing a new face, doing a new hairstyle. So I got very used to being nude around people. And I think I became quite quickly desensitized. That's probably why I was stood chatting to you with like no, forgetting that I didn't have any clothes on.
Same in reverse because of the photography.
Yeah. So you just like, you forget that it's not normal. It
becomes sort of irrelevant in the moment, I suppose.
Yeah, like it's not important. So I think it wasn't the nudity that I was worried about because of that. So I think it was more a case of, I really want to do a good job and I'm new at this and I'm a bit of a perfectionist. Like if I think I should be good at something and I'm not, or I think that I'm not doing a good job, I'll really beat myself up. So I don't know whether it was a combination of that in that moment of being like, oh my God, I literally have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
That was probably it. But it was great. And that we did 3 hours. And then when I left, I remember leaving and getting on the train. And I was just so buzzing. I'd got all these beautiful pictures of all these artworks that had been made of me. People would message me going, how did it go? Like, are you okay? And I was like, that was the best thing ever. Like, I loved it from day dot.
That's amazing.
It's ace.
It's great that it gave you such a buzz. Like,
yeah. There are times when I'm like, oh, like I'm really tired. Like if I've been at work, like yesterday, I was at work all day on my feet and then went and life modeled. And I was a bit anxious about being tired. I was anxious about like, have I had enough to eat? Have I had too much to eat? But even when there's the days where I'm like, oh, I'd rather be in bed. I know that 2 poses in, I'll be like, oh, I'm so glad that I didn't. I've never cancelled ever.
That's
never ever
record.
Cancelled in like 3 years.
Even not for illness or anything?
No, I've been very lucky.
Okay.
I've probably modelled when I've been like under the weather, definitely. Mm-hmm. And I've maybe said, I'm not going to be like my usual dynamic self. Mm-hmm. I might need to be sitting down or leaning on something a little bit more, but it's always good for me to go and do it. I'll always make myself go.
You get like a adrenaline rush when you do it.
Yeah. Well, you get the adrenaline rush from the doing it, but also there's just the loveliness of chatting to people in the break, chatting to people afterwards, seeing what people have made of you as well, having nice conversations with people. Like the amount of times somebody's gone, oh, I haven't done this in 20 years. And they're like so proud of what they've done.
Yeah. There's such a positive intention from start to finish with that whole thing, isn't there? Like for everyone involved.
Yeah.
That it must feel great to like bring happiness to others as well as and make yourself feel happy.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Like, from every direction, it's positive, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you've really hit the nail on the head when you said all the intentions are positive. Because it's like, people ask me all the time, like, oh, have you had a bad experience? And I'm like, no, To go to a life drawing class, you really need to want to be there for the right reasons. So yeah, everyone's there with good intentions. I'm sure there's the odd person. I'm sure there are people out there who've had, creeps or idiots turn up. But on the whole, everybody's there for lovely, lovely reasons.
Having been to a life drawing session, and obviously clay life as well, I've been to a few life drawing sessions. It would be really hard to be in that setting and have that intention. I think
stand out instantly.
Well, you're in a room of
clearly,
artists. Like you're going to be exposed pretty quickly as
definitely.
Not being in like that, not being your intention.
Yeah,
it'd be such a stupid thing to do. But there are stupid people out there as well.
There are stupid people out there.
Have you ever felt vulnerable being nude as a life model?
As a life model. I think the only times I've maybe felt vulnerable is if I'm either feeling a little bit poorly or it's the time of the month.
I see.
Or there's some like environmental factor. Like I modelled once a couple of years ago and it was so cold. Everyone drawing was in hats, gloves, coats. You could see their breath. I did the first hour and I was shivering so hard. One lady was like, I can't look at you because looking at you is making me so uncomfortable knowing that you're that uncomfortable. So we had to stop and the host gave me a jumper to wear and I had to put my socks and pants back on. And we did the rest of the other half with me basically clothed because it was so cold. So yeah, in terms of like attendees, no, not particularly. Yeah, it's usually something environmental, like it's either really, really cold or it's so hot that I feel like, I'm at risk of like, I might faint, which would be embarrassing. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it would be embarrassing, but
just like
I wasn't saying
unprofessional.
Well, I think it could be understandable if the environment was so extreme that, I mean, I can't believe people stood there for an hour and watched you shiver. That sounds, I mean, it was impressive that you pushed it that hard. Yeah,
well, I do that a little bit too much. I do sometimes be uncomfortable when I don't perhaps need to be, but I'm really stubborn.
Yeah. You've said about being a dancer.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you think may have shaped your views to be like so open to new modelling? Maybe from even younger, or like even to get into dancing, like to use your body as like an art form. Do you think there's anything that kind of like triggered that?
My mum's an artist. Both sets of grandparents all painted, drew. Both aunties as well. My brother takes photos. My dad is a musician. So there's always creativity, always been in the family from pretty much everybody. So yeah, I think that kind of openness. When I started life modelling and people were like, does your family know? I was like, yeah. They're like, great, because as long as you're doing it safely, then I've never had to kind of hide it or, what's that? That's weird. Why are you doing that?
How about friends?
Everyone's really supportive. But yeah, like you probably, most of my friends are creative people. They're photographers, they're musicians, or they're artists, or even if they're not, everybody who I'm kind of friends with from the last decade has come from a love of music and going to raves and kind of, that kind of like open-hearted, open mind kind of mentality, really.
Yeah. So where do you draw inspiration from for your modelling work?
Definitely the dancing. So I was very lucky. I had a dance. We kind of were ballet tap modern trained, did our like exams, medals, scholarships, whatever in that. But my dance teacher was amazing in that she was so varied in what we did with her. Like we did a lot of like African tribal dance, Broadway stuff. And I think listening to all those different kinds of music really early on helped shape that. Like watching music videos, like Bob Fosse, who's just incredible, but very like unique and strange choreography. So definitely, again, the dancing is a big influence, but also just like I bought a big mirror and I'd practice. And from practicing and learning what poses I enjoy doing the most for people and then leaning into that. So I much prefer doing shorter poses that are more uncomfortable but are more interesting and more difficult for people to draw. So basically trying to make myself look as complicated as possible. So being in front of the mirror and figuring it out and seeing, okay, practice, how long can I how long can I hold this for realistically? So a lot of literally trial and error and taking pictures and being like, okay, is that interesting for somebody to draw? There's a lot of that.
That sounds like a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Like build it up from your own reactions to what you're doing.
And then there's things like, so when me and Adam do our duets, that was our third duet. We have very similar modelling styles. So sometimes when you do a duet, I did a duet with another gentleman and the poses were agreed in advance. We had like reference photos to work from and we basically did those poses, which was great. He'd never modelled before. We'd never met until half an hour earlier. So it's kind of like, hi, like, nice to meet you. Off we go. And doing quite like intimate Baroque, like sculptural style poses together. But me and Adam, we decided on the first like 2-minute poses, just so we're not kind of going, what we're doing. And then we just improvise and we take turns to be the first person to pose and the other person fits around them. So I think that's really helped me kind of loosen up a little bit and be forced into a little bit of a different style sometimes.
So as a life model, where do you draw the line on what's like tasteful and acceptable and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. I suppose that's very subjective to you're either thinking about yourself or you're thinking about who is going to be looking at you. I guess I just do what I think is like what I'm comfortable with. I'm not particularly kind of like I'm going to push myself boundaries wise. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I think it's very individual. It's not necessarily something that I kind of have explored. There are things that I see online that I don't consider to be like overtly explicit or anything like that, but I know that that's probably not comfortable for me or not something that I would enjoy. I guess I'm more of like a bit tame, probably. in terms of like posing and things like that. I guess I'm much more like your kind of like classic art model rather than like being super like costumed up or anything like that. But yeah, I think some people really enjoy like pushing themselves and seeing how far they can get as feeling comfortable. Maybe that's something for me further down the line when I have more time and more space to think about things. Yeah. Maybe.
I did once do some filming at a live art festival, and I found that people were using their body in ways that were quite extreme and being nude in the process.
Yeah.
To do kind of like live performances.
Yeah.
And that was eye-opening because I was like 23 or something at the time, so I'd never seen anything like it. You know, both with like how people treated their own body in terms of like they'd pierce the faces.
Yeah, like extreme piercings. Yeah, I had a friend who she used to be quite into that, and she had like peacock feathers pierced through the backs of her shoulder blades, and she had wings for a day, and it looked absolutely incredible.
Well, that was the thing that I noticed at this festival. It was like, whoa, I'm visually looking at stuff. Amazing. Like a guy pulled a casket, a funeral casket, like a mini one, backwards using his lip. They put hooks for his lip and he walked backwards through Ipswich.
Or like suspending people with hooks and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that was the first night I saw some people suspended. I was like, what is this? But then also extreme body stuff, like which I was filming at the time and I was not expecting some of this stuff.
Wow,
like,
okay.
Woman was just going around the room like just humping everything. They was making a point about materialism, which was like an hour and a half of this like nude woman doing that, which was like quite an interesting experience to watch. But then there was like a closing night party where this woman was putting all sorts inside her and like spraying water all over the place.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've not got a rain cover for my camera. It was like, you know, taking things to like serious extremes that I've never even fathomed before. When I got home to my flatmates, I was like, you guys have no idea what I've just been doing this week.
Like, when people go, what did you do last night? We're like, well, let me tell you.
I was like, I couldn't believe it at the time, and I'm still finding it hard to believe right now.
But yeah, things like that. You're like, all power to you. Like, that is ace.
Yeah.
But I know that that's not for me.
Yeah.
Or at least it isn't right now. Who knows?
Yeah. I suppose as well, like, where you're at now has come from a point, like, you've developed from it.
Yeah,
so you just
definitely. Know. You just don't know where it's going to develop, do you?
Sometimes that can be exciting, I suppose. Like working with different artists in different contexts.
Exactly.
Like being asked to do things unexpected, but new.
Yeah. There's a couple of accounts that I follow. There's a life drawing class in Berlin. It's whole, we're like, oh, it's in Berlin. Obviously, that's how it is. But like, it's maybe 4 or 5 models, and there's like a theme, and it can be quite extreme in either the theme or the costume or the poses. And I'm just like, that looks so cool. I'd love to be part of something like that or make it happen. But I think some of that is maybe like a product of your environment. Like Berlin's just that kind of place, isn't it? You're just like, oh, obviously that happens there. Yeah. Everyone's so cool. So yeah, like I'm not like, don't rule stuff out, but I don't have a lot of time. I'm maybe not necessarily the confidence right now to like go a little bit more extreme, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I suppose it's what makes you feel comfortable is the most important thing. It's you're doing it for at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're looking for figurative artists, photographers, models, and activists. If you'd like to be a guest on Art versus the Algorithm, reach out to us on our social channels at Art vs Algorithm, and let's chat.
In a profession that focuses on physical appearance, how have you navigated body image? Has there been any?
Yeah, I mean, so hugely positive experience. I think most life models find it to be a huge confidence boost, or at least gaining a sense of maybe not necessarily body positivity, but like being more neutral towards your body. Lots of life models come from a place of being quite hating their body, and they've given it a go once and then they've gone on this lovely journey. You don't have to be like, I'm going to love myself every day, because that's so unrealistic. So I definitely am much more comfortable now than maybe I was 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I've always been very, very slim. I don't think the dancing helped, but I am like metabolism turbo crew.
I mean, join the club.
Yeah. So always kind of was like, people always used to be like, like, are you anorexic? Or like, I'm just like, no, like I can't put weight on. But it was that kind of thing as I got into my like late teens, early 20s, there was this thing of like, oh, I haven't got any curves. I'm not like a real woman. I find it very hard to feel like feminine or feel like I look grown up. And I really did struggle with that quite a lot. And then when I started life modeling, it's like nobody thinks that. You kind of gain a different appreciation for, because I think with the dancing thing as well, you have to look at yourself in quite a critical way to be like, your leg is in the wrong place. You're stretching this way and you need to be this. So dancing in front of mirrors from a young age for like lots of hours a week, you do look at yourself with a critical eye, not necessarily to be critical, but from a technical point of view. And I think I carried that. And this is kind of like, I still look at myself in the mirror, but it's like, that's going to look really interesting to an artist. So it's definitely helped massively to just be like very appreciative of what I look like.
That's lovely. I mean, It's interesting that you also said that like most art models you found have come from a place of having kind of body confidence issues.
Yeah.
And it did make me think, I wonder whether that's partially what draws people towards it, to kind of like challenge that and to try and fight that within themselves,
Yeah, definitely.
I don't
for some
do it,
people.
so I'm only speculating. But
No, but so I did my first solo exhibition in February, and it was all about life models in the life modelling community in Greater Manchester and the Northwest. And quickly can't just be pictures of me nude, because that was all I had for reference. So I reached out on Instagram and I explained, this is what I'm doing. Would any life models would contribute either photos for me to make artwork from, or quotes, or both? And it was really interesting to hear people talk about their motivations or like what they get from life modeling. And you had everything from, yes, it being a body positivity. It was just like, I was feeling really down and I had this opportunity and just thought I'd give it a go. And now they had this amazing journey of totally 180 in the way they look at themselves, and their life and their confidence has changed around it. There's some people who do it as like, it's a political act. Like, fuck you, you're not telling me where I can and can't wear clothes. Some people, it started off as like just needing to earn a little bit more money. And then they've kind of fallen in love with the scene, the community and the people. So everybody's reasons are quite unique and interesting. But yeah, I think a lot of people have an aspect of exploring body confidence in their reasons for trying it in the first place.
Yeah, it's quite respectable actually, because it's like from the outside, it's like, oh, it's personal growth. You're like, you got to really push yourself. Your own, it's self-awareness as well. It's like, this isn't a good way to be thinking, so I'm going to actively do something about it and put myself in a position where I'm uncomfortable, but growth is what comes out of that.
Yeah.
From my perspective, that's like quite a respectable, thing
I never really thought about it like that. That's really nice.
Well, maybe it's good to hear outside perspective as well.
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, I've said this a million times as well, but maybe I've not said a million times on the podcast though, so I can say it. But I'm always like massively in awe of the people I shoot when they're nude. Like, and that's not changed. Remember the first time I ever shot nude with someone? Yeah. And I was like, when I got over the like, oh my God, what do I do part? Yeah. After that, it was just like, wow, like, I've got so much respect for you that you've like, and also respect for you that you've trusted me. And like, I have to be like really careful with that trust. It makes you feel good to have been part of that too. Yeah, because like you're only in that situation because they have that mutual feeling of like trust and respect. So that's also like a lovely thing for you to realize about yourself. So if you'd come across the wrong way, you wouldn't be there anyway shooting them. Yeah, and that boosts my confidence and makes me feel more comfortable. And I've got to the point now where I'm almost like, I trust myself. If anyone took the clothes off in front of me, I'd be like A, fine, and B, be able to photograph them. And I think that's like a superpower. Yeah, definitely. I'm yet to find how to make tons and tons of money out of it, but I'm working on it. But it's a superpower. And one of my best mates who I grew up with, she said to me right at the beginning of me doing it, she's like, you make women feel comfortable, Will, and I'm not surprised that this is what you're doing. And that was like super nice to hear. Compliment. And that also boosted my confidence more. That I was like, well, I've known her since I was like 11. Yeah. So if she's saying that to me, I think that's probably why we're friends, hopefully. Yeah. Then I'm hoping that's a good foundation for like me going on to work with people that I don't know. Definitely. It's been handy for me to grow up with sisters, I think, as well, and understand women to a certain extent. Oh, interesting. So yeah. It's given me a context to do that. Yeah, different insight probably. Potentially, but I'm still a lot to learn, There always is though, isn't there? Yeah, definitely. And as a woman, like moving on from this, like have you felt any pressure to like maintain a certain look? Or is there any, you see it's quite open in the life modelling community, which is a great thing. Which is great. I mean, there's some life models have a very specific look, like they're either very heavily tattooed or like quite like an alternative aesthetic, like a certain hairstyle or loads of piercings or things like that. Like, I think if that's your thing, then it's obviously hard not to look like that. But I don't feel like, okay, people have been drawing me like this for 3 years, I have to continue to look like this. It's really, really nice. And I think there's so much scope for people, different artists want to draw different things. Like, I know that probably quite a lot of artists wouldn't particularly be interested in drawing me because like it's not particularly interesting to look at, but they would prefer to draw somebody who is older, who has a bit more character in their skin or their face, or somebody who maybe is a little bit more curvaceous or muscular, or somebody who's really alternative, who's got like loads of tattoos and piercings. So there's room for everybody, and that's why it's so lovely. Yeah. It's kind of like it goes against some of the pressures that people feel from like the outside in society. Yeah, if all life models look the same, there'd be like 3 life models. So there's room for everybody, yeah. That's great. I mean, the artists as well want to involve different looks and different approaches and challenge themselves with that as well. I have like there are certain things that probably, if anyone has anything that's pre-Raphaelite, my hair's quite curly naturally, curlier than this. I've got that very pre-Raphaelite look. I see where you're coming from. So if somebody goes, do you want to do a pre-Raphaelite thing? I'm just like, I can totally see why you've come to me. But yeah, like it's nice to not be like, oh God, now I've got to look like this for as long as possible. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. And as being a life model, like influenced your personal growth and like your self-perception, we kind of covered that. But like 100%, definitely. Like I was saying before about the saying yes to things. 3 years ago, if you'd have asked me to do this, I'd have been like, oh no,
haven't got anything to say. I don't know what I'm talking about.
You are instantly like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, yes, definitely. So yeah, hugely more confident, not just in a kind of like in terms of body, but also just talking to people and being out and being sociable. And it does teach you a hell of a lot about yourself and you have to kind of be like, yeah, okay, am I comfortable? Am I not comfortable? If I'm not comfortable, I'm going to have to say something. You kind of have to just like get over it or like say something if you're not cool. So yeah, 3 years ago, confidence level compared to now is massively different. And I do attribute it hugely to life modelling.
It's a very handy transferable skill, that.
Yeah, really handy transferable skill.
Like most things in life.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it's kind of the key one to have to drive yourself forward in life, isn't it? Like that self-confidence. So,
yeah.
I mean, off the back of that, would you encourage other people to do it?
Yes. I mean, I think you do have to be probably in a good place mentally. That is maybe the one caveat in terms of, I don't really know, although maybe not. I don't know. It's a difficult one.
Why?
Because, 99.9% completely lovely experiences. I would hate to be like, yes, everyone should give it a go, and somebody, end up in a bad situation or have a bad time. But it's a really special thing. Everyone should try it once if they're in the right place in their life. Some people do it once and go, I love that, and that's enough for me. Never again. But there are things like, not necessarily life drawing classes, but I know from speaking to Simon at Britain Uncovered that there's, at least in London, like a body positivity meetup that's once a month, and it's a bit more of like a social, but everybody in the room poses for 6 minutes. So think something like that, where it's not necessarily a life drawing class.
I see. It's just for the
experience. Some people draw, I believe, but it's not so much like strictly an art class. It kind of can put people off a little bit. But yeah, I think there are huge, huge positive things.
How do you perceive the current state of nudity in society and art? Like, where are we at with our collective viewpoint, do you think? And where do you think we're going?
It's a weird one, because I think, like, on the whole, people are a bit more progressive, but we're still quite, definitely in the UK, still pretty prudish. So I think the acceptance of, like, things that are, quote unquote, like, more sexualized nudity is more acceptable. Like, so many people are on OnlyFans now, and people are, like, much more accepting of that. So I think that's why there's so much frustration around censorship of artwork, or like skill trips not going to galleries or museums and things like that. So yeah, I think there's like quite two different threads in terms of like accepting nudity, because there's so many different levels to it. There's a lot of work to be done, I think.
Do you think we're going in the right direction?
I mean, I think generally, yes. But I think technology is definitely getting in the way, for sure.
Yeah. How do you feel social media's approach to nudity impacts you in your work?
It's a big deal, because, like, you can't just make stuff and post it.
Right.
Like, you've constantly got to think about, you either risk getting your account taken down. You end up having to very heavily censor yourself. You have to do loads of research into how to censor stuff to put it online, which is just like a whole other job. But it also means that you can't just be free to express yourself, which is like the whole point of being creative. So yeah, I think it really does stifle people. It does stifle people's creative expression. And then as a result of that, it gives people a sense of like what you're doing isn't worthwhile, or increases that stigma, forces things even more like underground, especially if you're from a marginalized community. It can be really detrimental, especially if your creativity is your way of coping with your mental health, and then you're trying to be creative and your posts are getting removed and you're getting shadow banned. It's just another layer of difficulty towards sharing things with your community and getting that feedback on the work that you're doing. Yeah, really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're seeing as well, I suppose you see your work. I suppose social media encourages people to make comparisons with each other.
Yeah.
And you're then seeing your work fail, seemingly, because it's not getting the traction, it's not being put out there.
Yeah.
In parallel with someone else's that is, that maybe are adhering to the guidelines that are put out, or
they're a bigger
are big
account.
enough
Exactly.
for the guidelines to not apply.
Exactly.
The double standards of it.
Huge double standards. And I think it's that, like, there's almost this sense of, you don't really get told, other than whatever community guidelines, there's so much nuance to what is and isn't accepted by the AI algorithm that's looking at the images. I saw a YouTube webinar on how to censor your photographs or whatever to put on Instagram, and some of the stuff was so ridiculous. Like some of the things that had been flagged and shadow banned, because obviously the algorithm looks for like porn stuff, doesn't it? And it was this woman had made like a little presentation of images that had been shadow flagged for that reason and shadow banned, and it was like a painting of challah bread because it couldn't differentiate between the bread, the shape, the curves of the bread, and like two people having sex. Or like there was one that was like a painting of a clementine, and it had been flagged because they thought it was a boob, but just because of the shapes and the tones. And do you know what I mean? So it's that whole thing of like, it's bad enough to have to do all that censorship and thinking about what you're doing and like not sharing things, to then maybe have things flagged for ridiculous reasons by not even a human being, to then have to appeal, and it probably, again, it's going to like AI, or it's very rarely going to another human being to be judged on another level, to be like either acceptable or not. And it's just another thing for you as a creative to think about. You should just be able to be like making your work and putting it up there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like going off the title of the podcast, which I'm like, it's like bringing up the film title in the middle of the film.
You said the thing, you said the name of the thing.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously this is like art versus the algorithm. What you're explaining there, it's literally like the AI that's been designed and developed is directly stifling and shaping the work that artists are making.
Yeah.
Artists have generally led movements in society.
Yeah.
When artists are being stifled and not able to lead movements in the 21st century, where that's the platform, isn't it, that we use? Like social media is the platform we use to share and communicate and reach out to large groups of people. There's a whole swathe of artists that aren't able to use that platform. Hundreds, thousands of them. And I wonder, like, what impact do you think that's having on the world in general, or and what direction we're going in?
It could be massive, couldn't it?
Imagine a world where that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Where there was no censorship. I mean,
obviously some things need to be censored.
Well, that was what I was actually going to ask you, was like,
but it seems like
any censorship in new bodies necessarily. In what context?
You need the guidelines in there to, like, obviously to protect like kids and people, like vulnerable people from things like that. So there need to be certain things.
Well, there are potentially ways to stop them from going on those platforms as well.
But it would need, something like that, rather than being like, you can't put that up.
Yeah.
So whether it's like, I think we touched on this a little bit when we met, which was like, a different platform, but then you come up with ways around. Like, if you come under pressure from Google, or like you need a workaround for iPhone because they're not, like, Apple's not going to let you use this thing. So it's really complicated, isn't it?
There are things beyond the specific social media's AI.
Yeah.
Like, then there's like the app store's rules that allow apps to be on
there's
phones.
layers and layers and layers and layers.
And then I suppose that could go all the way up to like government regulation, depending on what country you're in. But then I suppose it is the role of artists. It has traditionally been the role of artists to challenge that and push those boundaries and like be a bit like, fuck you about it. Which is sort
totally.
of, I mean, that's kind of I'm trying to do it a little bit here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like I've got a political agenda, but I want to share the views of people
artistic agenda.
Yeah, I want to share the views of people who have felt that, and feel under pressure from that, or feel that that's having an impact on them as well.
Hugely. And I mean, like, even just when I first started life modeling, I made my account. It wasn't private. I quickly made it private for obvious reasons. But I was constantly seeing life models lose their accounts and be back with like a backup and a backup.
Is that why you made it private, for not losing your account?
A bit of both. Like, I made it private so that I could be a little bit more protected from just randoms.
Yeah.
But also, I just thought that might protect me a little bit better from, people just report things. And like, why are you following a life model if you're going to report their pictures for nudity? So it was so I could vet like who could follow me. But it's like, your Instagram account is not only like your community and your way of sharing your work, but it's also your archive in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
So seeing artists and models lose, like a decade's worth of community because, they've had a few things flagged, but it doesn't tell you how many is too many, does it?
No, you just
suddenly lose it.
Someone I know actually lost, I think either yesterday or the day before, lost their whole account. It just went.
Yeah, and terrifying. I mean, there was a glitch, wasn't there, maybe last year, where loads of people got the thing that was like your account had been removed or doesn't exist. And that happened to me while I was at work. I've got a personal Instagram, I've got a printmaking Instagram, I've got a life modeling Instagram, and I've got a fourth one for something that I moderate for a printmaking collective that I'm in, but I didn't have that at the time. And this glitch happened, and I still got my personal, I'd still got my printmaking, but my life modeling one, it looked like it just got taken down. And I was thinking, that's like a third of my income. That's how I get my work, a lot of it. That's my archive of all these lovely collaborations and life drawing classes. And it was just like absolutely heartbreaking. And then 2 hours later, it was all back. But I think it really shit lots of people up, including me.
Yeah. I mean, it's like real consequences to this outside of social media. So it's people like,
people's
get over
entire
it.
livelihoods.
It's just an Instagram account. But then, like you say, it's like this leads to you being able to put food on the table, being able to
exactly.
This is what you've dedicated your life to doing. And suddenly it can be taken away from you. The fingers of this stretch further than just your phone.
Exactly.
Like it goes into your outside life.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for you that didn't happen, but it must have been stressful.
It was.
Just circling back a little bit, obviously I know what personal consequences are for you, if that was to happen to you, like what the personal consequences would be. But what do you think like the long-term consequences of censoring art and freedom of expression could be moving forward?
Huge detrimental effects. Anybody remotely creative, just that loss of having a platform to put yourself out there would be massively devastating, especially for emerging artists who don't have a huge following. Like Instagram was the tool for creatives back in the day, wasn't it? That's how you built your community. That's how you built your business. That's maybe where you gained confidence in what you were doing as a creative. You found your people, especially if you're from a minority or a marginalized community. So to lose that would be horrible, especially for like nude art. It would just perpetuate that stigma that it's like something that needs to be hidden, and it would push it more underground. And I think you would kind of end up with things being a little bit seedier because of that. It kind of would create its own like weirdness. Thinking about like how much me looking, I know we doom scroll, but me looking through my Instagram feed at creative things, it does enrich your life. So there definitely needs to be a human element to whatever kind of censorship is going to happen. Like the fact that it's all AI and you have to appeal to get to a human, and that human's probably going to go, I can see the difference between art and not art. You would hope. Obviously,
you are also
art
then
is
relying
subjective.
On one person's opinion from a specific place in the world that may have a...
But at the moment, it's kind of like when things get shadow banned or taken down or flagged, it can be, okay, so my artwork, according to AI, is as offensive as a video of a violent crime. That's a horrible thing to think about, something that you've spent years, months creating. You put it up to share it, and it's like, no, it's bad.
I suppose then that's the thing. You feel that a bit. Like you feel like you've done wrong in some way.
And it is personal because it's your art. People are like, it's not personal because it's AI. And it's like, well, it's personal to me because that's what I've created. That's me.
Yeah. And you've maybe got over the fact that like you're not going to get many likes or whatever, but for it to just kind of to not even have a platform,
you're not allowed to exist.
Where people can't even like look at it, and they don't need to press a button or whatever. Just not even given the chance to see it. That must be personally problematic. And then also it's problematic for the people who can't see it because they're not being challenged, they're not being
exposed to things. So they're not seeing something that might just make them smile or
give them a new perspective.
Interested. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a shame. If we were to fight back against this censorship of the nude and the body and promote body positivity collectively, how do you think it could be best achieved?
We just need it to be humans. AI is not the deciding factor. AI maybe can flag things, but it's a human or a group of humans that decides whether it stays or goes. But also, like, you know, Instagram just gets away with having extremely fucking vague guidelines. So having clearer guidelines on what is and is not acceptable without this just like vagueness. Also, I know there was talk about that everyone has to adhere to, but there was something that, was it these like health bars? I think they've started doing it on Facebook where you can see the healthiness of your account, how close you are to having your account closed. Something like that. I think they
have account status.
Yeah.
But it's also a bit vague.
Again, super, super vague. So if it was something that was like, okay, you've been flagged 10 times. If you have another 5 violations, your account will be closed. It kind of gives people that thing of like, okay, I need to up my game in terms of how I censor the work that I put up there. Do I share it or do I not? So that people aren't blindsided by your livelihood is now gone. See you later. Like, get over it.
There's no respect for that at all.
No, not at all.
Absolutely don't get it.
And there was something that I was watching this morning, and they were having this exact conversation, and they'd actually sat down with people from Instagram and Facebook, and they said they understood that, but just really didn't seem to care. They got bigger fish to fry. So it's not like they don't understand the impact. It's just they don't give a fuck.
I think the interesting thing that you said is, you said like a group of humans, and I did wonder like what group of humans would be.
Who decides who the group of humans is? That's the problem.
But potentially a group of humans that is educated in the matter that we're talking about. That would potentially be a group of artists.
A group of artists.
Because the people who are informing the AI that is then making the decisions, that's probably gone far beyond what people can do now, is they're a load of tech bros from America.
Yeah.
You know, and what backgrounds have they got, and what's info? I'm instantly jumping to a conclusion there. But I think artists are educated along those lines. But then that's the problem is, like you say, you need to get people like us
in that position,
and also to get through to those people who don't quite understand it because they don't have the same involvement in it or background, you know. So that's quite tough, but
it's the dream. It's a very hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
But they've obviously input these things into AI and they just kind of let it go. And it's like, can they even bring it back from where it is? Like, is it beyond the point where they can... Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's a bit mad, isn't it?
I don't think one single person knows how it's all working, which is part of the problem. But that's a whole different podcast as well. Because there's ChatGPT and all that comes in with that. But well, thank you for chatting to me. I've got one more question, but it's going to be a bit more lighthearted. I've started a new tradition on Art versus the Algorithm. I want you to pick a body part from a list I've prepared.
Okay.
Each one corresponds to a question. Once I've asked you the question, I'll ask you to fill that gap with your own question, which can be fun or deadly serious, and I'll ask it to a future guest. So the previous questions have been prepared by previous guests.
Okay.
So you need to pick from head, legs, boobs, bum, or hands.
Legs.
Legs, interesting. So if you could have any body part as a pet, what would it be, and why would you choose it, and what would you also call it?
I feel like having a hand as a pet would be really useful.
Why?
Because, like, it could get you a beer out of the fridge. It could do all your typing. You could do all your admin.
It's like the Addams Family.
Yeah, literally. And I'd name it something very, very silly. It would have to come naturally. Maybe something like a full name, something like a double-barreled surname, perhaps. But I feel like it would
like regal.
It would have to. It would come to me
upon seeing the hand.
Yeah, after some time.
So it wouldn't be thing.
Yeah. No, that's too obvious. That's way too obvious.
I see. Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for chatting to me on this. It's been interesting changing locations, but we got there in the end.
Constantly changing locations.
And I'm looking forward to putting it out. And thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been lovely.
Art versus the algorithm. So, which side are you on? You've been listening to Art versus the Algorithm, hosted and produced by Will Preisner, music by Ned Wolfgang Kelly. Voiceover by Alexia Kombu.